Welcome back to Other People's Lives. I'm Joe Santagato.
I'm Greg Dybeck.
And we just want to give a quick shout out to our patrons who are supporting the show at patreon.com/OPL show. If you do sign up and support the show, you get bonus episodes and, access to a Discord where sometimes we follow up with our guests and you get to chat with them. So
yes, and today we are speaking to a man who has experienced conversion therapy in an attempt to change his sexual orientation from gay to straight. One of the most bizarre / interesting topics to me, personally. Really excited to learn more about this and what goes on. So thank you for being on the show today.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
So I think a good place to start would be your life right before you experienced the conversion therapy. I guess, where you were at and what led you to, be subject to this therapy.
I'd been dealing with basically shame for being homosexual for most of my life because I grew up in a Christian household. And it was a pretty conservative Christian household. I myself was and still am a Christian. And I'd been consuming books that were meant to help me, become straight. And I had, my family knew, all my siblings knew that I had tendencies toward this. At the time, I said that I had struggled with same-sex attraction. I was still a virgin at this time. And I wanted to remain a virgin until I could get it sorted because, in conservative Christian circles, it's all about saving yourself for marriage. And of course, marriage is between a man and a woman. So my mother and father had found this. They found this. It was within our city. And they suggested it to me, and I joined it willingly.
So at this time, you were communicating with your parents that I guess you were having feelings related to homosexuality, but this is something that you had a desire to change.
Yeah. I looked at gay pornography and I had crushes on guys, and I didn't want any of this because I wanted to fit in with the rest of my family. We're all getting, married to the opposite gender and having kids, and I was getting older. I was around 18 when this happened. And yeah, I had told them, they knew about it. They knew that I was, gay or struggled with same-sex attraction. So I was pretty open with my family about it because it was something I was ashamed of, and it was something I wanted to get out of my life. So yeah, it wasn't a matter of me being forced to go at all.
So did they at any point, was it always shame? Did they always kind of bash you for this thing? Not bash you, but just kind of, talk about it in a negative light where it's yes, we need to get this out. We need to fix this problem.
Yeah, it was, I don't know at what point it started, but I always knew being gay was wrong. I took violin as a kid, and my violin teacher was gay, and I remember my mom talking about him, and that was the first time I'd ever heard about, man having sex with another man. I was homeschooled. I lived on the prairies, so I didn't go to school. I didn't interact with lots of other kids. I didn't hear, I was very closed off. So the idea of being gay was introduced to me as a sin, like smoking or drinking or having sex before marriage. It was lumped in with all of those.
Wow. So a ultra conservative Christian environment, to the point that, yeah, you were being homeschooled and it was pretty much all your family's teachings. Wow.
That's true. Yeah. My only social interactions were on Sunday with other, people around the countryside that went to the same church as I did. That was really my only social interaction. So, yeah, very conservative.
So when this happens and you decide, and they bring it up to you, okay, there's this conversion therapy, you join that willingly. So where was your mind at that point? Were you hopeful that, okay, this is the answer to all my prayers of trying to get this, bad thing out of my life? Were you hopeful in that, or how are you mentally going into this?
Yeah, I was, as far as I can remember, because this was over a decade ago, but I was extremely hopeful that things were going to go well. Because I thought, okay, well, now I'm going to go to a place where I can be really open with other people who struggle with the same things. And, when you start communicating and interacting with people with the same struggles, it starts to ease the burden and make it easier to come through struggles triumphant on the other side. So I think I did have a positive outlook on it before going into it.
Were you upset with yourself because you had same sex attraction? Were you just like a part of you, like, I don't want to say hate yourself because that's like a little extreme, but was there a part of you that was upset that you had this?
Yeah, like of course I was very upset with my about the fact that I was attracted to guys and men. Like as far as I could see at the time, like it was perverted and I didn't want it in my life. So yeah, I was very upset with it. And anytime I looked at pornography and jerked off, as soon as I was done, I'd feel like, overwhelming guilt, not just because I jerked off, which, wasn't the best thing for a conservative Christian kid, but because of what I had jerked off to.
Right. And is the belief at that time that homosexuality is a mental disorder that can be cured?
I don't know. I don't think in my family, we didn't talk about it like it was a mental disorder. It was more just a sin that you're tempted to commit, just
Hmm.
like anybody and any other sins they commit.
Interesting. So your family decides that conversion therapy is obviously worth a shot here.
Decided well.
So how does that even begin? What is day one of gay conversion therapy for how old were you? 18 at the time?
I believe I was 18, yeah.
Yeah. What was that like?
Well, this situation, like it was in the city that I was living in at the time, and it was in a big church after hours, and I believe it was like I'm sorry that I say I believe, and if I recall, because it was quite some time ago, but it was it was very similar. Like the setup for this therapy was very similar to AA, I think. Like you just met in this room, you met a whole bunch of other people, but it wasn't really meeting because we were all uncomfortable, and there was a couple of leaders, and yeah, like it went from there. It started with praise and worship and prayer, and yeah, it was very awkward. It was sort of just like a church. It was almost like a church service just geared toward homosexuals.
So you guys would just kind of sit there. Did you have to share your story at all?
Um, yeah, it started first with this praise and worship session where we would all sort of, watch the leaders, lead the praise and worship and lead prayer. I don't recall if they gave a sermon or anything, but I'm sure they did. Um, so that was probably for about half an hour, and then after that, they had all of us form groups with a couple of mentors, like people that had gone through our various sexual struggles, and so I was in a group of about 5 or 6 guys, and we went to like a separate, smaller room, and that was where it became a lot more like a AA meeting in the sense that at that point, we would talk about what we had struggled with through the week, if we had been looking at pornography, and basically our journey and how it was going as far as like getting out of homosexuality.
The mentors, so these are people who were leading the sessions that claim to have cured their own homosexuality by going through the same process that you were going through?
Yeah, they were meant that was what we were meant to believe, is that they had come out the other side and were now straight. The founder of this whole gay conversion therapy session thing was he was quite old, and he was positive for HIV or AIDS, so he had lived that life, and he had come out the other side, quote unquote, and was now straight, and you know helping others to do the same. And so the mentor in my particular group, the smaller group, he was just a few years older than me. I think he was 24 or 25. And, he had like patched things up with his father because, that's where homosexuality stems from a lot of the time. Apparently is, a bad relationship with your father.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's the
Yeah, I was led to believe very early on that my homosexuality stemmed from that, and I believed that probably up until about 7 or 8 years ago, I still believed that the reason that I was gay was because I had a distant relationship with my father.
Huh. Now, when you're going through this, I know this question probably sounds funny, but you know, you're young, you're impressionable, you're speaking to these mentors who, if you believe them, have been cured. Is there any point where you feel like this could be working, or not even close?
It never for me. Like, I mean, I saw the mentors, and so I believed it was possible. But like, it wasn't like magic. And while I was going through these weekly sessions, I just constantly felt like I wasn't working hard enough. And that's why it wasn't like I wasn't doing the necessary work somehow, or that I wasn't. Maybe if I would have believed more, it would have worked.
It's a lot of shame involved here.
Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
A lot
getting.
of shame.
so was there any? How long did you do the therapy?
I think it was around 6 months, I think, weekly.
Wow. So every week you'd go in there for a couple hours, I assume.
Yeah, and there was a curriculum, and I saved this curriculum for a long time. I threw it out when I first moved out of my parents' place because it was like, what is this bullshit? But I did save this curriculum for a while. So we were working through some sort of curriculum or some sort of writing. I don't remember what this curriculum stated or what this journey in the curriculum was supposed to be, but like it ended, like the sessions ended when we reached the end of the curriculum, kind of thing.
Hmm. So you're talking about basically a structured class here, because that's what fascinates me too is the amount of work that this group had probably put into, structuring this, creating a curriculum, exercise lessons. It seems like it was really regimented in that sense.
Yeah, and it's a business. Like we had to pay money for me to be in it, right?
That was
Mm.
gonna be one of my questions. Got
Yeah.
it. Well, that kind of changes everything, doesn't it? And is it an affiliation directly with the church, or is it like a private organization that does this?
I believe it was a private organization, and to be honest, I don't think it exists anymore in my city.
Wow. Do you think, I mean, maybe this is more so in retrospect and looking back, but when you think of some of the, exercises and just the shame, it seems, of the things that you had to discuss, do you think that it was more harmful? Obviously, it's not something that's going to help or work, but harmful in ways like for me, I can imagine, as that shame builds up, as you're struggling with something that you're being told can be fixed, but now you're failing at it essentially. Does that bring on depression, anxiety? Like, I would just imagine it being so harmful in so many other ways.
It for me was like it was I guess my parents would probably see it as harmful because it was sort of after that when I realized that it was like, okay, well, I've gone to this gay conversion therapy. I don't believe I worked hard enough, but at this point now I'm giving up because I did this and it didn't have an effect. So like while I was going through it, like I was very ashamed and it was awful and I still dealt with that for a long time afterward, but it was not too long after that that I was like, okay, not that I was out of shame. I still had a lot of shame, but it was when I got out of that that I was like, okay, the work is too hard and I want to have sex because like at this point I was an adult, right?
Hmm.
And so, it was around that time when I started hooking up. I was still filled with shame, and I know that this thing caused more shame, but as far as how it affected my sexual life, it did push me toward homosexuality in a way.
Did that kind of affect your family at all? Like how they felt towards you? Like were they accepting, or did they, because you hear some horror stories of like, my parents kick me out of my house, or my parents tell me they don't love me, or this and that. Did it kind of put your relationship with your family on the rocks because of this?
No, it didn't because, like, at that time, I was only living with my parents. It was just me, their adult son, and my two parents. And yeah, like, I was hooking up, I was having sex, all this kind of stuff. But my parents and the way I communicated with my parents was that I didn't want this to be a part of my life. And so Yeah, that was why I was only hooking up. I wasn't looking for love at the time, because if I was only hooking up, meeting somebody one night, meeting somebody else the next night, there was no commitment here. So I did this for about 2 years because I didn't want to commit to a life of being homosexual because I was still ashamed. So my parents, they
Yeah.
didn't kick me out or anything because they knew that, they knew that I was still struggling and I didn't want to be gay despite my actions, right? It wasn't like, I'm gay, I'm proud, accept me for who I am. And then they would kick me out. That wasn't the case. It was they thought I was struggling because I told them I was continuing to struggle, so they accepted me.
Do you think they would have kicked you out if you did, you know, kind of own it?
It's hard to say because I only owned it after I'd moved out and I had my first boyfriend. And it was when I had my first boyfriend because I had decided, this is bullshit. I'm gonna catch diseases. This isn't healthy for my mind or my body. And that's when I was like, okay, well, I don't know what's happening with my personal journey, my personal struggle. So I'm going to have a boyfriend, a committed boyfriend, so that I at least am protecting my body.
Mm-hmm.
And so I
Yeah.
think if I had ended up in a relationship, like a committed relationship with my boyfriend while I was living at mom and dad's, and they knew and they saw, like, I think at this point they might have kicked me out. But
Hmm.
I definitely couldn't say because it didn't happen.
Right. Well, spoiler alert, you didn't convert. So I guess at oh man, it didn't work. But at what point, do you say to yourself, even if you're not fully, committed to, okay, I'm going to own this as, my life going forward and my partners, at what point do you tell yourself, I got to stop meeting in this, church basement with this group because this is just not working? Or as you said, this is bullshit and I need to get out. And how did that happen? How did you get out of it?
Well, I'm afraid it didn't go that way because there was a curriculum and I stayed for the entire curriculum. It wasn't this
Oh.
wasn't a thing that this wasn't a thing that would carry on after I left, right?
Oh, it's
So
just
the
like a
curriculum
course
It's
that
ended
like
you
a,
and I
finish?
so you got like a degree basically in conversion
yeah.
therapy. You put your time in, and
Oh,
then you're
okay.
good.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, I finished the curriculum or whatnot. Like I finished the sessions, and then, I could continue to have a relationship with my mentor, like, or, like alcoholics, they have their sponsor, right? It was
Mm-hmm.
basically like a sponsor. I could continue to have a relationship with a sponsor, but that didn't turn out to be anything because I didn't want to tell him shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Imagine like texting someone like I touched a penis today. Like what are and then
Awkward.
that's wow. So okay, so wow. So it's just a course that you finish. It's crazy that they're profiting off of this too. Like looking back, do you think these people who ran this organization believe that change is possible here and like have had success stories, or is this just exploiting conservative Christian, groups who want to just convert their troubled, at-risk children?
Yeah, I feel pretty strongly that the founder is just is just somebody who somehow was brainwashed to the point where he believes he's straight. And I do believe that they believe they were doing good work. I don't, because like there wasn't that many people, and I think it was like $400 for these 6 months. Like it wasn't expensive. So I do feel like the leaders and the organizers believed in it.
Yeah, and you said brainwashing, which I think is an important word. I mean, do you feel like that's what the attempt of something like this is to, brainwash or just repetitively just, insert enough messages into your mind that you can somehow convince yourself that you're not gay?
Yeah, I think so. Like I feel like, at least for me, I was in a lot of ways brainwashed as a child, and this was just basically another step of the brainwashing. I remember at one point meeting some older cousins of mine. Like they were adults and I was 18, but these people were in their 40s or something. And my parents had set up a meeting with them, and they were hardcore Christians, ran their own church kind of thing. And basically they'd set up a meeting with them and I was going to talk with them and see what they had to say about coming out of being gay, and their advice, like I remember their advice because I had this meeting with them in an airport, and basically all it boiled down to was anytime you think about a man or you have an attraction to a man, tell your mind that's a lie. It was basically like anytime you have an inclination toward homosexuality, remind yourself that it's a lie and it's a lie from the devil.
Lie to yourself.
Yeah, basically it was just, yeah, lie to yourself. That's really all I was being told. So this therapy session, it felt the same. Like it was just like looking back, I just feel like I was just constantly being told to lie to myself.
Yeah, just suppress it all, and maybe it will go away.
Yeah, just ignore it, and then eventually, I don't even know. I mean, looking back on it, do you just feel like, well, that was a complete waste of time, and this is obviously just like a whole sham? And also, like, I had another question I just wanted to ask real quick is, what was the reaction if it ever happened? I'm not sure if you like told your parents like, hey, listen, I'm embracing this, like I'm gay, I'm not like ashamed of it anymore, like I am fully, wearing it.
Yeah, like I mean, for the first question about whether or not I believed at any point that it was a total sham, um, no, I didn't. Not during that time. The whole time, I just thought I wasn't working hard enough. Um, and as far as like, how I came out to my parents saying, "Yeah, I've embraced it," it wasn't like that either because this committed relationship I had chosen to have, for my own health and sanity, it became serious, and it was after we decided to move in together that sort of shit hit the fan with my family.
So you just ended up telling them like, I'm moving out of the house and I have a serious relationship with a man.
Yeah, basically that's how it went. Is I had to let my family know that I was moving in with him. I wasn't getting married because I still, even after I moved out, and this was a really hard decision for me. It was some of the, probably actually the heaviest time I've ever gone through was the decision to move out with my boyfriend while still being eaten up about being gay and feeling like I'm never going to actually marry him because of my shame. Like just feeling in my heart that I'm going to be breaking up with him at some point because the shame is going to be too unbearable and I'm going to have to try and go straight. So it was very strange that I decided to move in with him, but I loved him. And so I just went ahead with it. I was sort of, I guess, living in the moment, despite the fact that I had this overwhelming guilt and shame about what I was doing.
Yeah, that's got to be hard, and just how it shows how deeply embedded, that shame is. Like you're still obviously just acting on your natural desires, but still feeling that shame from your past. But yeah, I mean, I can't imagine that internal struggle.
Is that something that
But
you still struggle with today, or have you gotten past that point?
I've struggled with it probably like it was probably another good 2 years after being shunned by two of my siblings that I finally felt like I owned it. So it's really probably only 6 years ago where I feel like I own it, but I still have minor issues. They're not major, but it's still like there are still things that I'm working through.
Mm-hmm.
so what did happen when you told your family then? Does not sound good from what we just heard.
uh, it was hard. My parents were sad. Like it's hard because whenever these kind of topics of conversation came up between me and my parents, my dad would get very emotional. Like I don't have an abusive or mean father at all. He's like, I love my father and he's extremely sensitive. So when we were talking about this kind of thing, he would just cry because, he believes he's losing his son. And my mom was more of the battle axe, but she also was. She wasn't super harsh, but she knew how to communicate in a way that would cut me deep as far as making sure I knew that I should be ashamed or that I'm not making the right choice. And it wasn't, it was probably after a year or two of living with my boyfriend at the time that two of my siblings, it happened They were 6 months apart. This happened. So the first one, he had sat me down with my partner. Him and his wife sat down with me and my partner, and he basically said, "Do you consider yourself a Christian?" And I said yes. And my partner wasn't a Christian. So he had found some passage in the Bible that said, it's in the New Testament, something Paul said about, you can't break bread with, and then there's a list of kinds of people you can't break bread with that call themselves Christians. Like if these people call themselves Christians, but they're like liars, drunks, homosexuals, etc., you can't break bread with them. So basically they told me, we can't, because they're Bible literalists, we can't eat with you. We can't eat with you because you've chosen to, live this way. They could break bread with my partner because he didn't claim to be a Christian. And then 6 months later, my sister, she just over the phone told me she couldn't see me or talk to me until I had dealt with this. And she didn't give any really qualifiers or anything. Like she didn't even back it up with a biblical passage. It was just like, it was clear she had too much cognitive dissonance and she was just done. Like she didn't want to deal with it anymore. It was too uncomfortable for her.
So how does that make you feel? Like, do you kind of like, where's your head at? Are you kind of like, fuck them? Or are you just kind of like, I feel bad for them in a way? Or where's your head at?
I hate to say it because looking back, I'm pretty ashamed of how I responded because I felt so ashamed and guilty. And I tried so hard for so long to justify their actions because I knew how strongly they believed. And I believed that they studied the Bible more than I did, which is true. And they were more devout than I am. So I did justify their actions for so long. And that just, added to my shame for a long time where I was just sort of like, so sad, so upset that I don't have a relationship with them, and also sort of feeling like, feeling like they did the right thing for themselves.
That's heavy, man. Wow.
Is that still the case today? So you guys don't speak?
Yeah, I don't speak to them. Like I might bump into them at like a funeral or something, but yeah, I was at the wedding of my niece, and they were both at the ceremony. They just, quickly left, and only my brother was at the reception. My niece was totally hurt. Like it's affected her too now, right? Because she sees what they've done to the family, and they won't even be there for her on her wedding day because I'm there.
Wow. I no words for that. I can't even imagine. But wow, it's just what's so bizarre to me too is, I mean, I know there are people out there, like you said, who take the Bible very literally, but it's just always strange to me how, those words that are written, interpreted literally by them, just takes such a priority off over every other aspect of a human being, but wow, that's heavy. But is that something? Is that a relationship that you would look to try to amend and fix in the future, or have you kind of given up on that, or do you think that it would be on them to approach you to try to mend it?
Well, I've definitely come full circle. Like I never wanted to be somebody who had hate inside them because of how the church or people around them have treated them. Like I didn't want to be one of those kind of gays. And so I tried so hard to make sure that I didn't judge them too harshly. But basically, when it comes to a shunning, like it's a different kind of a wound than, angry words or something, because it's like there is no contact. So it's basically like they they put a knife in me, but they haven't removed it, and it just sort of sticks there. As long as I'm continuing to be shunned by them, I'm continuing to be wounded because it affects me in my relationship with my parents and my family, and the whole family is sort of broken because of what my siblings have done. So as I've come around, like it's impossible not to get more and more angry at them. The more time that goes on, like the wound just festers.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't finish the answer. So yeah, as far as like mending a relationship with them, like at this point, it absolutely requires action on their part. I'm not interested in reaching out to them or talking to them or anything. I was at the funeral of one of my aunts, and I guess my sister had told my mom, these are hard times because it's a funeral, like it's a sad time. Like, let Caleb know that he can sit at our table if he wants to. And in my head, I'm just like, what the fuck makes you think I want to sit at your table?
Yeah.
Like, are you completely deluded? Like, you think I'm over
Right.
here just like crying for a relationship with you guys? Like, I don't know you guys. You don't know me anymore. Like, it's not going like that.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah.
That's a.
And it, yeah, go ahead,
I was
Joe.
gonna say that's a rough position to kind of be in because, as you grow up and become an adult, you have more of an idea of who you are as a person, and when it becomes more clear to you but more clouded to everyone else, it's like that naturally drives you apart from these people that you're supposed to be the closest with, your own family.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I really truly don't believe. I even heard my dad, I didn't hear him say it, but I think my mom had told me that he said it. My dad said that my siblings that shunned me, those my sister and my brother, he said, they don't know Caleb. If they really knew Caleb, they never would have done that.
Wow.
Like, my dad was very against what my siblings have done.
Hmm.
And as time has gone on, my other siblings, I have four siblings. So my other two siblings, my two brothers, um, they've also maintained a relationship with me and realized that it's like, yeah, they don't share my values. They also don't believe that, they don't believe in homosexuality. They do believe it's a sin, but they've decided that it's not worth breaking up the family or shunning me
Mm-hmm.
to impose their beliefs on me. Like, I think they're respectful of the fact that different people have different beliefs, and I just wish these two siblings of mine could have done the same.
Yeah. Are you at least at a point where you don't feel blame for the relationship with them ending or any sort of guilt?
No, I don't, and that is actually a really great point and a good feeling because for a long time I did, and I was still thinking like, what could I do differently? What can I do now at this point? But I have definitely completely let go of any blame or feeling like, oh, maybe there's a mutual apology necessary. There is no mutual apology necessary. It's just a one-sided apology.
Yeah, totally. So I guess to, move to the present day and, where you're at now, I know that's obviously a heavy topic, the family relationship, but would assume that there's a lot of positives now for your own acceptance of yourself and to kind of shed that shame. What type of place are you in now?
Yeah, like I am very I would say pretty free of shame. Like, I'm not 100% there. I think I'm likely going to have some small issues with it probably for the rest of my life because I'm a Christian and I know it's going to be a thing for most of my life. But yeah, like I'm not really ashamed anymore. I live in a way that um yeah, Christians wouldn't like, and and I'm still a Christian, and you know what? It's none of their business. We all have our own relationships with God.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting point. And before we wrap up, that's something that I did want to touch on. Is you did say that you're still Christian, and this is obviously what we're discussing here, from conversion therapy to Bible literalist and family shunning you. I mean, this is the extreme end of the spectrum of some people with certain Christian beliefs. But for you to still say you're a Christian, I don't want this to come off as bashing Christianity or putting this all under the umbrella of Christianity. So how have you been able to still call yourself a Christian? Like, what does it mean to you despite everything that you've gone through in your life, sort of being fueled by Christianity?
Yeah, I know it's hard because like I don't generally like being lumped in with Christians. I think it's understandable why I wouldn't. Like, so it's difficult, because I call myself a Christian, but I don't really like to necessarily associate with them.
Yeah.
So I guess I call myself a Christian because I believe the Gospels of the Bible. I believe the Gospels, and as I believe the Gospels, I have to call myself a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
And I read the Bible clearly. I read the Bible in a different way than my siblings do.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, and I guess there's always that separation of, faith and the institution itself. So, you know, but wow, I think that's a, really powerful, heavy conversation to have, like I said, to really understand and get some insight into that kind of extreme end of the spectrum, and these things that you've gone through is really, really eye opening. And, but it is good, to hear the place that you're at now and in a healthy relationship. And it seems like happy and, accepting of yourself more than anything.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us. I know like this is probably not the easiest thing in the world to talk about it. I mean, you're like you said, you're pretty removed, but it's also not that, far away that this all happened, and it's been like your upbringing. So we appreciate you coming on and shedding some light on it.
That was my pleasure. I really hope that anyone listening that struggles with this just knows that, sometimes the way you feel, like the guilt or the blame that you feel, isn't actually coming from you. I think that was something that took me a long time to realize, that I felt guilt, but it wasn't actually coming from me or from God. It was just, brainwashing, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
No, 100%. And I think, a lot of people listening to this, even if it's not as extreme or they haven't experienced conversion therapy, are still struggling with this, are still struggling with families who might not be accepting of their sexual orientation, maybe a fear of even coming out. As we know, this is still a struggle a lot of people are dealing with. So I think this will be really helpful for a lot of people to hear your story. So thank you so much again.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.
All right. Have a good one.
What a wild story that was, like from start to end. It was like this whole character arc, for lack of a better term. Like, it's just wild to, kind of hear about that, because you don't think about, his point of view. Like, I was thinking that he knew he was gay and he was, totally fine with that, but his parents kind of forced him into this conversion therapy. But if he was the one who was kind of like, yeah, I need to get this out, like, he was so conditioned into thinking it was like this very negative thing that he was willing to go to conversion therapy.
That's the scary part, because same thing. I was shocked when he said that. I was ready for, this is bullshit. I went through this therapy just knowing that this wouldn't work.
My parents.
Fighting against it. What? Pees your pants?
To appease your parents.
Oh. I thought he said because I peed my pants.
No.
Yeah, exactly. But no, it shows how deep rooted that conditioning, I guess, can be from childhood. And that's the scary part, knowing that, this still goes on, and there's still people to this day, 2020, like, this is wrong. This is a sin. What you feel isn't natural. There's nothing biological about this. This is, a mental illness. And just the whole idea of conversion therapy blows my mind. Like,
the fact that
pseudoscience of, like, it's bizarre that it's legal. I think it has been banned in some states. I don't know, but it definitely still goes on. And I think there's even more extreme versions than what he went through. Where
there's like shock therapy or something.
Yeah, like, no, that has happened in the past. I hope that doesn't still happen, but who knows? Yeah, there's like boarding camps and like, who knows what tactics that are just being invented, that are just based on spirituality.
Terrible. It's really terrible, because like, I mean, I grew up Catholic. We went to church every Sunday. I went to Sunday school, whole thing.
Same.
But like, at a certain point, you have to know that reading this thing literally, and to think that this book is definitive of like what it should be, is like, it's almost foolish. It's almost like immature. You know what I mean? It's like a game of telephone. This is how I think about like the Bible and whatnot. Not to get like super religious and like, whatever, but it's like, to me, it's like a game of telephone. Like, if you play that in a room with 10 people and you whisper something into someone's ear, by the time it gets to the 10th person, it's not the same sentence anymore. And this book is how old? And I mean, the things that are written in it, like, along the way, things are going to change,
Yeah, totally.
Like,
That's
and
a
especially
fact.
like now in this progressive, well,
Wow.
more progressive compared to that time, world that we live in, there has to be something in there, because there are a lot of religious people out there that are now realizing, like, dude, if you're a homosexual, like, it's fine. Like, there isn't this. I mean, there are those extreme people that like stand on the side of the highway with fucking picket, like, you know what I'm saying? They picket against, gay people, which is just like the most ridiculous thing. Please get a job. What are you doing? Um, but it's just wild to me. And also something like that I was thinking about, which I said to him, was it's very unfortunate that at the time where he was becoming comfortable with his sexual orientation, his family, it was getting more clouded for them, and they're supposed to be the people that you're closest to, your family. And also, it's very interesting that the book and the religion that you practice, because religion, for the most part, how it's advertised, is supposed to bring people together, belief, community, all of these things, and it's
Family
actually
values.
driving you apart.
Mm-hmm.
It's dividing. It's divisive, which in this case, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
this is like, this might sound weird, but a part of me almost understands that at some point in time, people thought being a homosexual was a horrible thing. A part of me, like, understands that, because it's not the normal. Like, there's more straight people than gay people in the world, so I can understand people being like, what is this? This is bad, But how over time you can still think that today is just how. It's just wild to me. And to think that you could just like talk your way out of it. We're
Yeah.
talking about
It,
like I don't even know how to explain it.
I mean, we've talked about a lot of crazy things on this show, but this one of the hardest things for me to wrap my head around is exactly what he went through. A family being able to shun another family member. I mean, I'm super close with my family. I know your family means everything to you. It's just so hard to imagine that something outside of your core family, the people is going to dictate your relationship with your family, and if you can see or interact with your family member. It's literally impossible for me to even begin to wrap my head around. But that's what makes it, so sad. But that was eye-opening, and I think what's crazy is that this is still happening. Things like conversion therapy.
And it sucks too, because it's gonna have lasting effects, and like just in the way that he's saying, like, he had this shame for so long, and now that he's like, a little removed from it, he still has some things that affect him.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I mean,
it's just unfortunate.
Come on,
man.
that's how do you not develop trauma from that? From, I mean,
being
self-imposed
told what you're feeling inside
shame.
is completely wrong.
Yeah, and you telling it to yourself, which is even more powerful, arguably, than an outsider telling you something about yourself, is
Way
you
more powerful.
imposing that shame on yourself and telling you that you're wrong, and that voice in your head constantly going against everything that you feel is natural inside of your body is that is a struggle to the highest degree. But good to hear, like a lot of our guests, that he was able to navigate that. And, obviously it wasn't easy. I don't think his journey's done, but, to be in any place of self-acceptance now is really positive and really good to hear.
Yeah, I can appreciate that aspect of, us talking to him, was that at the end he was kind of like went out on his own and like did his thing, and for anyone out there that's like kind of struggling with this sort of thing, like, you could take this guy as an example of, he even was bought into the fact that, like, I'm going to try and change and get out of this and like this and that. But at the end of the day, like, your sexual orientation, I'm a firm believer that is what you are born with. That's what you have. All these people that are saying this is a mental illness, it's a disease, those people have a mental illness, or they just have a complete ignorance to like information. They just don't want to learn new things, or they don't want to adapt. They don't want to change. You can't help those people. But if you are struggling with it, I hope this episode is helpful in, having like helpful in your journey to just owning it and being like, this is who I am, because that's all I would want in the world is for people to kind of feel that way, because hearing what he was saying in the beginning of this episode was just heartbreaking, of being like, I was feeling these feelings, but I was feeling so much shame, you know, like, and just being upset with yourself and like hating yourself. That's the worst thing you could possibly do, in my opinion, is have a horrible view of yourself or hate yourself for something that you've been brainwashed, that you shouldn't be hated for, you know? It's just, it's horrible to hear, but I hope that his story, you know, helped some people as well.
Yeah, I hope so. And, you know, even outside of this story, you know, it's just the LGBTQ plus community as a whole. I mean, there's still a long way to go. You know, there's still a lot of fight that needs to be done. There's still human rights issues on the table. It's insane that, you know, this is still politicized, this issue, that people feel like they have control over someone else's body and rights because of sexual orientation. So, you know, it sucks, but we just got to keep making progress. And I think we need to keep getting stories like this out there. So from two straight white guys, we're here for you. We're your ally. And these are the types of stories we want to share. So if it helps at all, we're happy.
Yeah. And, yeah. So for anyone out there, if you think you have a story that fits for our show, we would love to hear from you. Go to oplshow.com and send us an email, and we go through all of them. And if it works, we'll schedule something out.
Yes, check us out on Instagram at OPL Podcast. We post clips there, and check out the Patreon, patreon.com/OPL show. You get a ton of bonus episodes if you sign up there. And if you're listening to this on audio, we are on YouTube at youtube.com/otherpeopleslives. If you're watching this on YouTube, we have a ton of old episodes that are not on YouTube, anywhere that you get podcasts. So you can check all that out.
Yep, that is all. See you guys next time.